On today's episode of the podcast, we dive into anxiety, caffeine, and 3 things we should do every day for our mental well-being. If you are struggling with your morning routine right now or are just going through a really hard time, this episode is for you. Let's get started. Welcome to Live Mindfully with Laurie Moore, the podcast that invites us all to slow down, take a deep breath in, and show up as the most present and mindful versions of ourselves that we can each day. It is Tuesday here in Brisbane. This podcast will come to you tomorrow. I am sitting here with my Lipton tea and my 2 macarons, don't tell my kids, and the day has started off beautifully. It's coming toward the end of spring here, but the weather has been, it's been really weird. Yesterday it was 1,000 degrees. Today it is, I don't know what the temperature is. Hang on, I'll check. It is 23 degrees right now and raining. I love that I have that on my phone, so easy to check. This morning has started off really slowly. My kids woke me at 5:30 a.m. for cuddles, and normally hubby and I will do a yoga practice and be done by about 6, but instead we just laid in bed and had these amazing cuddles, and I feel so calm and peaceful right now, and it's given me the idea for today's podcast, which is 3 things we should do every day for our mental well-being. So this past weekend, I caught up with a friend of mine, and we were talking about how we start our days. And this friend of mine suffers from pretty severe anxiety. She's been diagnosed and is on medication for it, but that medication only goes so far, right? The medication is not designed to take the anxiety away completely. The medication is designed to numb as much of the anxiety as possible to support the person who's taking it. So when we have anxiety like this, whether we are medicated for it or not, we still have to take proactive steps to manage that anxiety, to put ourselves on the best path. So you might be wondering at this point why I am bringing this up. In Australia, according to Beyond Blue, 28.8% of the population have experienced an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. That is a lot of people. But whether you have a disorder or not, most of us know that feeling of anxiety and go through bouts of anxiety from time to time. And because our cortisol levels are highest in the morning, remembering that cortisol is known as the stress hormone, the hormone that is released in increased doses by the body to manage stress, it can get a bad rap. Because too much cortisol consistently released into the body is bad for us. But we need cortisol. It actually has a number of important roles, and one of those is to wake us up. But that also explains why anxiety-related symptoms tend to be worse in the morning. Because if we already suffer from anxiety or we went to bed the night before with anxiety, our cortisol levels are already a bit high. And now we get more released into the system to wake us up. Now, this is really powerful knowledge to have in your back pocket, because now we can use that to our advantage. We know it's not us. It's our body doing its thing to help us get going in the morning. It's a positive thing that this is happening. But what happens is the mind associates this feeling with anxiety, and it's the mind's job to figure out why we have anxiety. So it's almost like the mind misdiagnoses this feeling, and in its attempts to diffuse the situation, it starts to overthink, producing an overwhelming number of thoughts to figure out where the anxiety is coming from. Only that creates more anxiety, which impacts on the body. And then you can start to see how this really bad cycle forms. So my friend tells me, and look, truth be told, I have been hounding this poor person for years about this, but she's finally stopped drinking coffee. Finally. And I'm so proud of her. And if you are listening to this and you too wake up and feel these high levels of anxiety and immediately reach for a cup of coffee, you are doing yourself a huge disservice. You need to either cut the coffee completely or cut it back or drop your morning coffee to at least 3 to 4 hours minimum from when you wake up. And that's the advice given by Dr. Matthew Walker in his book, Why We Sleep. Because caffeine is so bad for someone with anxiety. And I'm going to explain why, and there is a link in the show notes that will elaborate on this. So I'm going to provide information in the show notes if you want to learn more about this. When you have anxiety, the main symptoms of anxiety from a physiological standpoint, that is to say, how anxiety presents physically in the body, comes from increased heart rate, feelings or sensations of restlessness and tension, shortness of breath, hot and cold flushes, and a racing heart. And I know you know where I'm going, but hear me out. Here's what the natural effects of caffeine do. Caffeine makes your heart beat faster. It makes you hotter. It increases your breathing, so it's harder to take slow, deep breaths. And the more you have, the more compounding those effects are, which is to say they become worse and worse with every cup of coffee you have. In addition to that, coffee is addictive. And so when it starts to wear off, we want to drink more, especially if we have anxiety. So the natural effects of caffeine, whether that be a coffee or a soft drink or a black tea, mimic that of the physiological signs of anxiety. And because those feelings are the same in the body, again, it's difficult for the mind to recognize that you aren't in a state of flux, that you aren't in an actual state of anxiety. And here's another point that you might not be aware of. And look, you probably don't want to know this. I didn't want to know this when I found out, but it has been powerful knowledge to have. It is really important to know the effects of things that we put into our body. So we start to feel the effects of caffeine in about 15 minutes. The levels in your bloodstream peak an hour later and remain there for several hours. It takes us about 45 minutes to wake up. That's without coffee. So when the natural cortisol levels in your body are just about to drop from waking you up, the caffeine kicks in and keeps those feelings of increased cortisol moving in the body. About 6 hours after you consume caffeine, half of it is still in your body and may not completely clear your bloodstream until 10 hours later. So, not 10 hours later, 10 hours after you've had that cup of coffee. So if you have anxiety and you wake up with anxiety and you start your day with caffeine and then you have another cup at morning tea and another cup after lunch and then another at 3 p.m. for the old 3 p.m. pick-me-up, you have consumed enough coffee to stay in your bloodstream for over 2 days. And if you do this day after day after day after day, then no matter how much medication you're on, no matter how much of anything else that you're doing to manage your anxiety, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for you. And I get it, I drink coffee too, but I have at least 3 free days a week. I rarely drink coffee after 2 p.m. I mostly have one at around 10 a.m. and that's if I have one at all. And it does take a discipline to do that. I did wake up and have coffee every morning, and it took ages for me to rejig that habit and change that habit because caffeine is addictive and our body craves it. And I also have included in the show notes a breakdown of the milligrams of caffeine in coffee, in tea, in soft drink, and in energy drinks if you're interested. So you can check that out too. And the reason I bring this up is because I noticed that my friend was not shaking. And she always has like a little bit of a shake, especially in the morning. And I noticed that she was not shaking at all. And she had given coffee up at the beginning of that week. Now she only drinks decaf. And so I asked her, how is your anxiety going? And she said, well, so long as she stays busy, she's fine. And that mornings are the hardest. We already know why. We've spoken about that already in this episode. And I work with people who suffer from anxiety and depression. And in my line of work, it's really common to have people seek out yoga to help manage those ailments. And yoga is phenomenal at calming the mind and bringing structure to your life and building strength so you feel capable of handling life's challenges. And so I have done a lot of research about anxiety, and I understand how anxiety works. I had anxiety for about 4 years, and I know how debilitating that can be on your life. So I have this personal connection to anxiety as well. And so I asked her, what's the first thing you do in the morning? How do you start your day? And she wasn't really sure. She didn't really have a definitive answer to that. She sort of said, well, I don't know. I do the morning things that everybody does. And I took this deep breath and I paused for a moment and I thought, yeah, we all do that stuff, don't we? The morning stuff, the stuff that we need to do to get the day started. And I hadn't thought about this for a really long time because about 6 years ago, I stopped getting up and immediately thrusting myself into the morning stuff. And instead, I started this little ritual, I guess, this simple and yet powerful kickstart to my day. Something that is unrushed, something that makes me so grateful and brings me so much joy that I can barely breathe sometimes because I am so happy. And I asked her if she did anything like that, and I was met with a ponderous face. And so now I am asking you to take a moment to think about how you start your day. Do you get up and do all of the morning things? Turn the TV on and check your messages and brush your teeth and get breakfast and wash your face and find your clothes? Or is there a brief moment where you do something that sets the tone for your heart, that sets the tone for your mind and for your day? For me, I walk down the hallway and I greet my kids with a big and jolly good morning and a hug, a long hug where I smell their hair and I thank God for their existence. And even as I say this now, I could cry because it makes me so happy. And I never pull away first because that moment feels so mystical and so important. And I know that that moment is also fleeting. And yours doesn't need to be anything like that, but there needs to be a moment, first thing in the morning, where you do something not because you have to, but because you want to. because it brings you so much joy you can barely breathe. And maybe it's boiling the water and watching the bubbles and the steam, and then drinking your hot water in your garden with your feet connected with the dewy grass. Maybe it's feeling the fresh morning sun hit your face, which has other benefits, by the way. Maybe it's hugging your pet or patting your pet or your partner. Don't pat your partner. Maybe it's rolling out your mat and doing a morning practice, or lighting a candle, or playing a song that you absolutely love and dancing like crazy to, or just listening to that song while you start doing some of your morning things. Maybe it's starting the day with prayer. But whatever it is, it needs to fit into your schedule. It needs to make sense for your current life. And it must be something that makes you happy, that brings you joy. Not someone else, not what you think should bring you joy, not what you think you should have gratitude for. Maybe it's staring at the photo of someone you love and you have lost and saying good morning to them. And thank you to the lessons that they taught you when they were alive. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter at all. It's just a touchstone to remind you that you are alive and that you have been gifted another day to create this incredible life, and that you get to choose how that looks. So it doesn't matter what it is. It just needs to be something that is important and valuable and joyful to you. My grandfather, when he was alive, he always saw the start of each day as a huge blessing, and only because his eyes opened. And he would say to me, how blessed am I that I got another day on this beautiful earth? How blessed am I that my eyes opened today? Because many didn't. And it's easy to skip this moment, it really is. But what a huge disservice we are doing to ourselves. We could leap out of bed and start all the doing, the checking Facebook, the making the bed, the replying to the emails. Or we could leap out of bed and be who we are, with no phone, no distractions, no to-dos, for just 10 to 15 minutes or less even, to just be with something that brings us joy. So that's my first thing that we should all be doing every day. The other thing that we need to get into the habit of doing, and this is so profound, if you can grasp this and you can operate with a level of consistency and actually schedule this into your calendar, it is a game changer. What we need to remember is there will always be another thing to tick off our list. There will always be another to do right after the one you've done. So if we know this, if we know we will never see the end of the never-ending to-do list, why don't we start scheduling in some of the things that make us really happy? Why don't we start scheduling in time to reset? 15 minutes of watching your favorite show, 10 minutes to close your eyes and just rest. Not just a coffee break, but a mindful, purposeful break. Maybe not a coffee break at all anymore. Maybe a water break. If we can schedule 10 to 15 minutes into our calendar every 90 minutes to 2 hours, sacred time to just breathe, to just exist, to go for a walk, to look at our surroundings, to get some sunshine, or listen to the rain, or hear the snow under our feet. Whatever's available to you, 10 to 15 minutes, 3 to 4 times a day to reset, but scheduled in so we don't skip it. My third tip, learn something you didn't know, but that you've always wanted to find out more about. We all have passions. We all have hobbies. We all have things that we do in our spare time. And for a great deal of us, these are the things that seem to fall away a lot when we reach that middle stage in our lives, that stage where we have the mortgage and the partner and maybe the kids. We have the older parents, we're the boss at work and life is busy. We have the play dates and we're doing all the cooking and grocery shopping and paying insurances. When we are at that phase in our life, it can be all-consuming. It can feel like the joy of living has been sucked so far out of us that we really don't know how to feel joy anymore. So take a little piece of time each day, 5 to 20 minutes, to learn something new about one of your passions, or to research something, or to go back over your old notes about one of your passions, one of your hobbies. It might even be learning something brand new about something you know nothing about. But learning is an important part of our mental well-being. And not learning something about work or some other boring aspect of your life. It's not a to-do unless work is your passion. But learning something that, again, sparks this joy in you, gets you excited and passionate about life. And learning is really important at keeping our minds and brains fresh, because our ability to reason and make good decisions depends on how well our brains interpret and process information. And learning challenges and trains these mental pathways, improving their effectiveness and refreshing old or unhelpful thought patterns. And here's just an added plus. Research is showing that lifelong learning may improve brain function and prevent or delay the symptoms of dementia. So take some time each day to investigate, to learn something new about a hobby or about a passion or about something that you've wanted to learn about. So let's recap. My 3 things that we should be doing every day for our mental well-being are: start the day with something you love, 10 to 15 minutes max, something that brings you a huge amount of joy. Number 2, schedule in periods of rest and grounding throughout each and every day. Number 3, learn something new about a current passion or hobby. And if you don't have one, think of something you would love to know more about. Again, this does not need to be onerous or time-consuming. It's meant to be fun. So if it is not evoking those feelings, it's the wrong thing. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support of this growing community. If you have loved today's episode, please share it across your socials and with your family and friends. I'll be back again next week with another great episode. It will be episode 50, which is so exciting. Until then, take good care of yourself.